My sister secretly changed my newborn's name while I was in labor, then reported us to CPS for abuse so she could keep him herself. When I begged her to stop, she screamed, "Leonardo was mine from the start. You killed my baby, so I took yours." I said nothing. That was 5 months ago. Last night, she stood barefoot in the rain outside our home, holding a photo of DiCaprio and whispering, "He was supposed to be mine." Huck, can you even imagine watching your own sister, someone you shared a childhood with, stand up at your baby shower and declare war over your unborn child's name? Because that's exactly what happened to me. She didn't just want the name. She was ready to destroy my entire family to claim it as her own. The story, I was absolutely glowing, pregnant with my first son, and we'd finally decided on the perfect name, Leonardo. It wasn't just a pretty name. It was a tribute to my childhood best friend, Leo, who we tragically lost a couple of years back. It felt right, a way to honor his memory and bring a piece of him into our new life. Everyone at the baby shower thought it was beautiful, sweet even. Everyone, that is, except my sister, Casey. The moment the name left my lips, her face, it just hardened. Then, with a sound like thunder, she slammed her palms onto the table, making everyone jump. "That's my baby name," she shrieked, her eyes blazing. "You know how much I love Leonardo DiCaprio, how I've planned to name my baby that since forever." We all just stared, dumbfounded. My husband, Samuel, tried to gently remind her that she wasn't even in a relationship, let alone pregnant, but it was like talking to a brick wall. She just wasn't hearing it. She started yelling, calling us traitors. Then, in a dramatic huff, she grabbed her things, stormed out, and left us with a chilling parting shot. "See you all in court." Honestly, we thought it was an empty threat, a classic Casey dramatic flair. But 2 days later, a stark, official-looking letter arrived in the mail. It gave us a measly 24 hours to relinquish the name or face. Consequences. My blood ran cold. This was real. That evening, my family called an emergency intervention. We all sat in my mom's living room, trying to explain to Casey, as calmly as possible, why I wouldn't be giving up the name. Her face was like an angry, blotchy tomato. She kept interrupting, saying my dead friend would understand, that this name, this dream of hers, had been her only dream in life since she was a little girl. It was twisted. Samuel and I stood our ground. We even had a lawyer friend confirm that, no, you absolutely cannot go to court over a baby name. When she finally understood that legal action was a dead end, she slapped us with an ultimatum. Either the name was hers, or she'd cut all contact with us. I remember it so clearly. The whole family, in a rare moment of complete unity, just pointed silently at the door. Her eyes went wide. She hadn't expected us to call her bluff. With an angry, defeated sneer, she finally said, "Fine, you can have the stupid name." We thought that was it. For the next 3 months, we heard nothing from her. We truly believed the nightmare was over. Then the day came. Labor Day. I was literally in the throes of giving birth, pushing with all my might, when the double doors of my delivery room burst open. And there she was, Casey. She strode in, clutching a teddy bear, and practically shouted, "Michael is here!" The whole room froze. Nurses, doctors, Samuel, me. Everyone looked utterly confused. Samuel managed to ask, "What on earth are you talking about?" Casey just beamed, rubbing her perfectly flat stomach. "I'm pregnant, too," she declared. "You said I couldn't have the name because I wasn't pregnant, so I went out and became pregnant. Problem solved." I swear, we all looked at her like she'd sprouted 5 heads. Security had to remove her while she shrieked about fairness. An hour later, utterly exhausted but overflowing with love, I was finally holding my beautiful baby boy, my Leonardo. A nurse came in, looking incredibly uncomfortable. "There's been an issue with your paperwork," she stammered. "It says here, the baby's name is Michael." Samuel shot up like a hawk. He immediately started investigating, and what he found made my heart plummet. Casey had actually tried to officially change our baby's name while I was in active labor. The hospital fixed it, but the message was clear. Casey was absolutely, terrifyingly determined. The very next morning, while Samuel and I were still recovering, my brother called. His voice was grim. "Casey's at the hospital. She's really hurt herself." Turns out, she'd woken up at 5 a.m. and spent all day driving to every courthouse in the state, filing name claims, trying to get someone to legally grant her the name Leonardo. She hadn't slept, hadn't eaten or drunk anything, and ended up with severe sunstroke. She collapsed on the courthouse steps and, in that fall, started miscarrying. They rushed her to the nearest hospital. The moment she was lucid again, she called me directly. Her voice was raw, venomous. "You killed my baby," she screamed. "You forced me to fight for what was rightfully mine. Leonardo was mine. How does it feel to know an innocent baby is dead because of you?" I hung up without saying a word. I couldn't. 3 weeks later, I was breastfeeding Leonardo, lost in our own little world, when Samuel's phone rang. It was Child Protective Services. My blood ran cold as the caseworker rattled off allegations. Samuel was supposedly violent towards the baby, citing a bar fight from when he was 17. My dad, who lived with us, was a threat, based on an old teaching scandal where a student had accused him of inappropriate behavior before admitting she lied. They even claimed our house was unsafe for a newborn. While we were still reeling from that horrifying call, my neighbor texted me screenshots. It was from our local Facebook group. Casey had written a long, self-congratulatory post about making the brave decision to report the abuse she'd witnessed in our home, painting herself as a hero saving a baby from danger. 20 minutes later, the CPS workers were at our door. I let them in, praying that seeing our clean, baby-ready home would end this nightmare. The caseworker checked the nursery, the baby supplies, Leonardo sleeping peacefully in his crib. But then she saw my dad in the kitchen. "Is this the grandfather mentioned in the report?" she asked, pulling out her paperwork. "The one with the teaching scandal." I frantically explained that the student had lied, that he'd been cleared, but her face had already changed. "With your husband's juvenile assault record and this," she said, her voice flat, "we have to follow protocol. I'm sorry." I couldn't breathe. I watched helpless as that woman walked into my son's nursery, picked up my sleeping baby, and carried him out of our home. "He'll be with family," she said, her voice oddly gentle. "Your sister seems very prepared. She already had a nursery ready." Of course she did. She'd probably set it up the day after the baby shower. Our lawyer told us emergency custody hearings could take time. The investigation did clear us eventually, but bureaucracy moved at a snail's pace. In the meantime, Casey had our son. She was posting photos on Instagram, calling him my sweet Leonardo, while I sat at home, pumping milk for a baby I couldn't hold. My body didn't understand that he was gone. Every 3 hours, like clockwork, the letdown reflex would hit, and I'd have to pump or risk mastitis. Each session was torture, a physical reminder of what I'd lost. Then my neighbor, Mrs. Doherty, came over with a casserole. She whispered, "That woman who took your baby, she was here last week asking questions about you." My hands shook as I took the dish. "What kind of questions?" "About your routines. When your husband gets home. If your dad helps with the baby." She even asked if I'd ever heard arguing. Mrs. Doherty shifted uncomfortably. "I told her you were wonderful parents. I'm so sorry. I had no idea she was gathering ammunition." Our lawyer explained that family placements were prioritized in emergency custody situations. Since Casey had prepared a nursery and passed a home inspection, she was considered suitable. The fact that she'd orchestrated the whole thing didn't matter without concrete proof. Samuel's boss called him in after seeing Casey's Facebook posts. The damage was done. My dad's attempt to substitute teach to help with expenses also failed after news of the CPS investigation spread. Meanwhile, Casey was thriving. Her Instagram was a daily parade of her Leonardo hitting milestones. First smile, first time holding his head up, all the moments I should have been there for. She even started a mommy blog about unexpected parenthood and when family steps up. The hypocrisy was suffocating. Every like, every supportive comment on her posts felt like a knife in my chest. I started documenting everything. A timeline, screenshots, every interaction. Samuel and I worked tirelessly. Dad, usually so quiet, offered to move out temporarily, thinking it might help our case. Samuel refused. "We're not letting her tear this family apart," he said. But doubt crept into my mind in the dark hours. What if we were unfit? I found myself second-guessing every parenting decision I'd made in Leonardo's 3 short weeks of life. On day 4 of the separation, I drove past Casey's apartment. I didn't plan to stop, just needed to be close to my baby. But her car wasn't there. My heart pounded. I called Mom. "Oh, she mentioned taking Leonardo to a baby yoga class this morning," Mom said. "She's really throwing herself into this aunt role." Aunt, the rage that filled me was volcanic. I drove to the baby yoga studio. Through the window, I watched Casey holding my baby, surrounded by other oblivious mothers. Leonardo was fussing, probably hungry. Did she even have formula? Was she giving him the pumped milk I'd sent? I wanted to burst in, scream the truth, but I knew that would only hurt our case. Instead, I took photos. Evidence. Everything was evidence now. The lawyer called later with mixed news. Good news, a hearing date, 3 weeks away. Bad news. Casey had filed for temporary guardianship, citing our instability and the ongoing investigation. She was building a case that she was the more suitable caregiver. She even claimed I was mentally unstable due to postpartum depression, that I'd hung up on her when she was miscarrying, showing a lack of empathy. I threw my phone across the room. It hit the nursery door, which had stayed closed since they took Leonardo. His sweet baby smell still lingered. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I stood in Leonardo's nursery, finally able to enter it, and promised him I'd fight. Not with lies or manipulation, but with truth and love and the fierce determination of a mother. The morning of the hearing arrived, a stomach-churning mix of hope and dread. We arrived early, our folder of evidence clutched in my trembling hands. Casey was already there, with Leonardo in a designer stroller, dressed in an outfit I'd never seen, covered in little Oscars. My body reacted instantly, my milk let down. I pressed my arms against my chest, trying to hide the growing, wet spots on my blouse. Casey immediately launched into her performance, dabbing at dry eyes as she described her concerns about our home. She presented glowing reports from an infant development specialist she'd hired. When it was our turn, our lawyer methodically laid out our evidence, the timeline of Casey's obsession, the text where she bragged about her plan, Mrs. Doherty's photos of Casey casing our house. Even Mom's secret recordings, where Casey called herself Mama, played for the supervisor. Casey's carefully composed mask began to crack. She flushed when our lawyer showed texts bragging about stealing Leonardo. Then came the moment that changed everything. The supervisor produced a document we hadn't seen. CPS had conducted their own investigation. They found posts from 5 years ago where Casey talked about naming her future son Leonardo, complete with nursery plans identical to what she'd created in her apartment. More damning. She'd been in contact with multiple fertility clinics in the weeks between my baby shower and her pregnancy announcement, maxing out credit cards for emergency IUI treatments. The timeline proved she'd gotten pregnant specifically to claim the name Leonardo. The supervisor's voice was ice-cold as she addressed Casey directly. The investigation has revealed a pattern of manipulation and deception incompatible with the best interest of the child. While the initial removal followed protocol based on the reports filed, it is clear those reports were fabricated as part of a larger scheme to obtain custody. Casey's composure finally shattered. She burst into raw, ugly sobs. She ranted about how unfair it was, how she'd loved Leonardo DiCaprio her whole life, how she dreamed of a son with that name. She accused me of stealing her dream, of forcing her to take extreme measures. The more she talked, the more unhinged she sounded. She revealed details we hadn't known, hiring someone to plant evidence, coaching witnesses, even admitting she'd deliberately gotten pregnant after the baby shower, seeing it as her only chance to claim the name. Her supporters, able to hear her through the thin walls, began filtering out. By the time Casey finished her meltdown, the waiting room was empty except for our family. The decision was swift. Emergency custody was revoked. Leonardo would be returned to us that day. Casey would have supervised visitation only, pending a full psychological evaluation. Her fraudulent reports would be referred for criminal investigation. The supervisor even recommended we pursue civil action against Casey for damages. Casey had to be escorted out by security, screaming about conspiracies and favoritism. Even in defeat, she couldn't accept responsibility. An hour later, I sat in a small room as a caseworker brought Leonardo to me. 5 months. He was bigger, more alert, but when I picked him up, he settled against me like no time had passed. Samuel wrapped his arms around both of us, and we stood there, crying and laughing simultaneously. The ride home felt surreal. Leonardo, finally where he belonged in his car seat. Dad waiting on the porch, tears streaming down his face. Mrs. Doherty and other neighbors who had supported us gathered to welcome him home. The nursery, empty for months, finally filled with baby sounds. That night, rocking Leonardo to sleep, I thought about the journey that brought us here. The false allegations, the social media campaigns, the financial ruin, the emotional torture of separation. All because my sister couldn't accept a name I'd chosen for my son. But we'd survived. Truth had prevailed, though at tremendous cost. Samuel was still unemployed. Dad's reputation was damaged. Our savings were gone. The trauma of having Leonardo stolen would take years to process. Yet, none of that mattered compared to having our son home. The first week was a whirlwind. Leonardo's sleep was completely disrupted from Casey's chaotic care. I spent nights walking the halls, relearning his cries, his preferences. Samuel worked tirelessly to expunge Casey's false reports from our records, contacting his former employer, slowly rebuilding his career. Dad, emerging from his self-imposed isolation, started helping with Leonardo. He'd hold his grandson with trembling hands, whispering apologies for things that weren't his fault. Packages addressed to Casey kept arriving, baby clothes and toys she'd signed us up for. Mom visited daily, revealing more disturbing details. Casey's designer outfits bought on credit, her specialist appointments often missed. We discovered Casey had been telling Leonardo's pediatrician that she was adopting him, that we had abandoned him. She'd forged consent forms, created false medical histories. Untangling that web of lies took hours on the phone. Samuel's cousin even sent screenshots of Casey still active in parenting groups, twisting the narrative, claiming we'd stolen Leonardo from her. The financial pressure was immense. My body wasn't ready, but I returned to work early, leaving Leonardo with Dad. Samuel, after countless job applications, finally got an interview for a position 2 hours away. It paid less, the commute would be brutal, but we couldn't afford to be choosy. He got the job. The supervised visits with Casey were a nightmare. She arrived in Leonardo DiCaprio t-shirts, tried to change his name to Leo, and criticized everything about our parenting. She even hid notes around our house. He's mine. This isn't over. We installed security cameras, changed locks, and our neighbors, finally seeing the truth, organized a watch for Casey's car. During one visit, Dad found a hidden camera in a teddy bear she'd brought. The psychological evaluation ordered by the court finally revealed the truth. Casey showed signs of delusional thinking, narcissistic personality traits, an inability to distinguish fantasy from reality. Her obsession with Leonardo DiCaprio had morphed into a fixed belief that she was destined to have a son with that name. Visits were suspended. She, of course, created new social media accounts, claiming the evaluation was biased, posting petitions. 3 months after Leonardo came home, Casey appeared on our doorstep, violating the no-contact order. She was disheveled, thin, sobbing about losing everything: her apartment, her job, her friends. She begged to see Leonardo one last time. Samuel called the police. She didn't resist, almost relieved as she was led away, clutching a photo of Leonardo DiCaprio. The next morning, her former landlord called us. Among her abandoned belongings was a storage unit key. Inside, we found years of obsessive planning: journals detailing her Leonardo DiCaprio fantasies, vision boards of imagined children, printed articles about custody laws and manipulation tactics. A decade-long delusion we'd never fully grasped. We turned everything over to the authorities. 6 months later, life had found a new normal. Samuel adjusted to his commute. Dad volunteered at the library, slowly rebuilding his confidence. My debt would take years to eliminate, but the financial strain eased. Casey's supervised visits never resumed. She refused therapy and eventually moved to another state, still telling people there about the son who'd been stolen from her. Authorities were notified. Leonardo grew and thrived, unaware of the drama. He learned to crawl in the nursery Casey called inadequate. Took his first steps in the home she tried to have him removed from. His first word was "dada," directed at Samuel. Simple moments, made precious by how close we came to losing them. 1 year after the custody battle ended, I finally entered Leonardo's nursery without feeling the ghost of those empty months. The room was cluttered with toys, books, evidence of a child well-loved and present. I picked up the stuffed elephant from my best friend's mother, finally telling Leonardo the story I'd always planned to share, about the friend he was named for. Samuel found me there later, Leonardo asleep in my arms. We sat together in the gathering dusk, no words needed. Our son was home, our family intact despite everything. The scars would always be there. Trust, harder to give. Innocence lost. But we'd survived Casey's obsession. We protected our child. We found strength we didn't know we possessed. As I tucked Leonardo into his crib that night, I thought about the name that started everything. Such a simple choice, honoring a lost friend, had unleashed such chaos. But watching my son sleep peacefully, safe in his own room, I knew I wouldn't change anything. He was Leonardo, named for love and memory, not for an actor or anyone else's dreams. Casey remained a shadow, a cautionary tale about obsession and entitlement, but she no longer had power over our lives. Our son would grow up knowing he was fought for, protected, loved beyond measure. That was the only truth that mattered. What would you have done if your own sister had tried to steal your baby over a name? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. I really want to know.